Good morning, good afternoon, good night for everyone that's showing us in the new webinar of Microsoft Power BI. Uh, my name is Gaston Cruz, and I'm going to do right now an intro to XMLA feature endpoints in Power BI. Just to present myself, I am a Microsoft MVP in the data platform category for the last 4 years. I'm working as a solution principal within Slalom. I've been using all the social networks. You can find me in LinkedIn, Gaston Cruz, or Twitter, Gaston F. Cruz, or Facebook, or you can reach me via email, gastoncruz at outlook.com. So let's present the different topics that we will be discussing today. We will be talking about XMLA endpoints as a new feature, but I want to intro this feature in a daily basis task. We have different environments going on right now in the whole Power BI data platform world. So this is kind of a feature that's more enterprise projects that you have. And in my experience, every time we jump into different teams and we discuss different topics about governance in Power BI, how you are going to work if your team is growing all the time, and sometimes part of your team is working with your data model, doing mashups, transformation, shaping the data, doing Power Query and all the stuff. And maybe another part of your team is working just with visualization layers, creating objects, graphics, and all the stuff that you can do in Power BI Desktop. And actually, what about if you split those teams and one team is going to be in charge of working within your data model and doing the mashups and working on the data set or data model of Power BI, and the other team is more working on the visualization layers. So one thing that I want to share here is actually you can bring those teams working together, and every time you open a Power BI desktop session, and this is kind of hope that everyone showing me on this, and actually every time, and I'm going to open a Power BI desktop session directly on the fly right now. And what I'm going to show you is that every time you open a Power BI desktop session behind the scenes, and this is my Power BI desktop, and every time, and you can see that I don't have any kind of data bringing in this Power BI desktop. It's just a blank canvas. So actually, when you go and open a task manager in your machine and you see your Power BI desktop session, you can see here behind the scenes, you open an engine and an instance of SQL analysis services. So behind the scenes, you have a 20 years technology in the engine of Power BI desktop. Behind the scenes, you're running a SQL analysis service instance, and you can connect to that instance using any kind of different tools like DAX Studio, like Tabular Editor. Right now in your July version of Power BI Desktop, as you can see behind the scenes, you have a new tab that you can see now that it's external tools. You can open from there ALM Toolkit, DAX Studio. You can open that Tabular Editor, and you can connect those tools directly to your session of Power BI Desktop, to your report. And those tools are going to connect and use this SQL analysis services engine. That is part of really important concept behind the scenes in this session, because actually that's where your data model lives. Your metadata of your data model lives in SQL analysis services. So behind the scenes, you need to be taking care that you have a database engine, that a tabular model engine in your Power BI desktop session. So that's being said, when you publish a data set, let's say that you create your data model, you get the data let's say from an Excel file, from a shopping list, from a SQL server, and you create your data model. You create your Power Query, your transformations, your relationships, even your measures in DAX. And then after that, and before you start creating graphical objects in your Power BI, you publish that data set to your environment, to your workspace within Power BI. So you can do that directly in Power BI Desktop, create your data model and publish that data set, blank data set, blank, instead of say blank data set, let's say blank Power BI report, because behind the scenes you have your data model. So when you publish from Power BI Desktop to your workspace, that's where your data set is going to live. Like here, for example, you have AdventureWorks data set. That is a data model that we bring directly to your Power BI environment. And what I can do actually is open a Power BI Desktop, and after my team work on that data model, they bring relationships, measures, calculated columns, all the transformations, and I can reuse that data model in different visualization teams within Power BI. So you can go here and say, okay, I'm gonna get data from Power BI dataset, so you can reuse even, and let's go back and say that from governance layer, it's gonna be great if you can use kind of governance profiled and users that functionality, they can test your data set. They can say, okay, this is my functional unit test of this data set, and this is an organizational data set that we can bring to different business stakeholders. So you can promote the data set, that then you can certify those data sets. You can see here that I have in my environment with my account, and remember that in this case and in this scenario, you need to bring your account to Power BI Desktop, because that account and that user belongs to different workspace. So if you belong to a workspace and you have rights in that workspace, even if you have reader rights in that workspace, you can get the data set and you can start working directly from that data set, and you can start creating different visuals around that data set. So what we are saying here is we split the work in Power BI. Someone is working just with the visualization layer. Let's say that we are going to bring from sales orders, we want to bring the tax amount, total due, and we are using that data set, and even on top of that, different teams can reuse this data set that we bring into that workspace. So everyone can reuse that data set working on different layers and different reports with Power BI. So that being said, until now, we are talking just about governance layer and how we can promote Power BI dataset to the workspace and then connect from Power BI Desktop to that session. But what happens with the enterprise layer? When you are in an enterprise layer, everyone is working in a data model like this, but perhaps the data model is not just data model with a few rows. You have millions of rows. You have millions of fact tables and dimensions, and you need to bring all together in your Power BI environment. That is kind of tricky, and you have aggregations, you have composite model, you have different techniques in Power BI. What I'm gonna show you right now is different options that you have in enterprise layer when you are working with millions of records. So one option is, and let me open my session of my Azure portal here. And you can see in my Azure portal, I have one of the services, that is Azure Analytics Services. And in my Azure Analytics Services, in this case, I have two different data models. You have the compatibility level, and those ones, you can see the server name here. So I can copy my server name. I can open my SQL Management Studio, and I can see all my data models that lives in this Azure Analysis Services. What's going on with the Azure Analysis Services? That brings the power for you to connect and to get data from different sources. Let's say again, I bring data from a SQL environment, SQL Server database engine. I can bring data from an Excel file. I can bring data from SharePoint list and mix that data in a different data model. And that data model is going to live in Azure Analysis Services. The main question here is, okay, but Gaston, First, you mentioned Power BI Desktop, and you can get data and create your data set in Power BI Desktop. And then you publish that data model in your workspace environment. What is the difference between handling the data model in Power BI Desktop and handling the data model in Azure Analysis Services? The main difference is the environment. And the very first pro in this kind of environment is that you can actually bring millions of records and populate, and you can scale up that Azure Analysis Service instance whatever you want to scale up. You have different query engines on compute levels that you can add for more CPU, more RAM that you can have in that Azure Analysis Service instance. So you can scale up your engine of your tabular models. So that being said, you can actually, and I'm going to open my SQL Management Studio to show you that actually I'm here. I am bringing, and I did this. I connect to Analysis Services. I connect to my session of Azure Analysis Services with my account. And after I connect to that session of Azure Analysis Services, I'm going to bring and see that we have two different databases here. I have my connection of my data model. This data model is connected directly to an Azure SQL database engine, and I can see all the tables, and every table can handle millions of records, and every table can have partitions. For example, in case of sales data model, for example, you can say, okay, I want this table to have partitions because I don't need to refresh the whole data model all the time. I can refresh only the last month, and I can have in my sales order detail, I can go to partitions, and if I need to, I can create different partitions here for every month, so I can refresh only the latest partition and not all the sales history of my data model. But how I can use this data model from Power BI Desktop? I can just go to Power BI Desktop and I can get the data from this Azure Analysis Service instance. Next question that everyone asks me is, okay, but how you bring those tables and how you bring the relationships in your data model, how you're creating that data model, how you connect to Azure SQL database and create this database here. So the way to do that, and you can use the tool that is part of the Visual Studio, you can download SQL data tools. SQL data tools allow you to create a data model using Visual Studio. And what I want to show you is how it's going to be to work within Visual Studio. Because actually, in my case that I'm using, I belong more for the data platform world, not for development world. So actually, when someone say, okay, but you could have to go to Visual Studio, everyone in data platform say, okay, but Visual Studio, I really feel comfortable with Power BI, creating my data model there. Why I need to bring to Visual Studio? I mentioned a couple of things here, but just to demystify how hard could be working Visual Studio is kind of simple in the way right now the whole product team is working to have this homogeneous experience in data models, in different layers, in different tools. Let's say, for example, in this case, we have Visual Studio, we bring this, just go into new project, and we can create a new tabular project using Analysis Services Tabular project, and we can start from scratch. But let's say that I want to bring a new data source to this data model. Let's say that I want to bring a new Azure SQL database, or another Excel file, another SharePoint list, or another Oracle view. So what I am going to do is just go to the data source, right click, import from data source, and let's see here. The window that I have here is exactly the same experience, the same window that I used to see in Power BI Desktop. When I start from scratch in Power BI Desktop, first step in my lifecycle management is to go and get data. And the get data option allows me to go to my Power BI Desktop and start getting data from different sources. In this case, you can see that the get data option allow me to connect to different data sources here. And you can see that the experience is kind of the same experience that I have in Power BI Desktop. Yeah, it's going to be more connectors in the future, but actually I can bring and I can connect my data model in Visual Studio, connecting with different data sources and combining with different data sources. Another thing that I want to show you here is that eventually I have my connection with my Azure SQL database, and if I want to bring more views or more tables from that source, I can import new tables. And again, the experience to connect to that SQL is again the same. You can connect to Azure SQL with your Windows account, with your organizational account, or in my case, I'm going to use a database account here. And actually, after I connect, I can see all my tables, I can see all my views, and I can connect with all my tables or views. And you see this navigator here, this navigator windows here, is kind of the same experience that I have in Power BI. Even if you click instead of load, something that I always say when I did dashboards in a day. Let's say that you want and you prefer to go to transform the data, just to be sure if you need to bring all the columns, you need to shape the data, you need to transform your execution of your import. So you go to transform data, and again, the window that you have right now here is the same window, and you can see in the top left here in my window, the name here is Power Query. So it's all about Power Query. Even if you need to manipulate the data, and let's say that you need to transform the data here, and you need to split the table or reverse row or unpivot or use the first row as headers, with any kind of transformation here that you have, all the transformation that you are doing here is part of Power Query. So you can actually right click in your table after a couple of things that I made here, and I can go to Advanced Editor, and I can see exactly the same window with the same Advanced Editor that you have in Power BI Desktop session. It's the whole Power Query engine that you can reuse. So even if you are familiar with Power BI Desktop and you did a bunch of stuff in your Power BI Desktop, you create your data model, it's going to be really easy to move your data model from Power BI Desktop to Visual Studio data tools. And not only that, it's not just the same engine and the same programming language and all the transformation that you can have. You can create parameters here. You can create start dates and end dates if you want to do, for example, partitions and incremental refresh in Visual Studio data tools. You can do that directly here in your Power Query editor within your SQL data tools environment. The other thing that I want to mention here is that actually, if I want to create a new measure here, I just have this icon here for measures, and you can see my measures. In my case, total sales, total quantity, but both of them in the top, and I'm gonna just do something here just to show you this, that actually total sales or total quantity, you can see here, that is DAX language. It's nothing different than you are doing right now in your Power BI desktop session. The only difference that is kind of small difference that when you create a new measure, instead of using only the equal, you have to put these two dots here and then the equal sign here. But let me do this. Let me show you that if I start typing, I can see all my DAX language bringing directly. That is more that intelligence to allow me to see some help when I write DAX language to any kind of measure here. So the same experience writing DAX language that you have exactly the same in Power BI Desktop and same intelligence that you have in Visual Studio Data Tools. The other thing that I want to mention is actually you can deploy this data model in different ways. So one way is going to be deploy this data model directly to my Azure Analysis Service, and that is kind of the old school. Until now, what we were been doing is we create the data model here, we get the data from different sources, then we create the measures, we create, and I can show you this, we can create the relationships here in our data model, and the relationships is kind of the same experience that we have in Power BI Desktop. You can have one-to-one, many-to-one, one-to-many, many-to-many. You have one direction filtering and both directional. You can mark any kind of relationship like active or inactive. You can do exactly the same experience that you have in Power BI Desktop. And then another thing that I want to share, and this is one of the why I want to bring Visual Studio Data Tools to my set of tools when I work in an enterprise environment. And the other thing is that you have source control here. So you can have the source control environment and you can attach the source control to your Azure DevOps environment. This is really important because actually, if I am working as a team and I am bringing my team working in the same data model, you can create branches, you can create different Azure DevOps projects, and you can have not only repositories, you can handle everything in Azure DevOps in terms of deployment pipelines, version control, all this kind of stuff that you usually bring onto the table using Azure DevOps. So actually, in this case, I can go to Team Explorer just to show you this, that if I want to bring this solution as a solution to my repo and then use that repo as a part of my source to create a pipeline. Let's say that I want to bring this data model to another environment. I want to deploy this solution to my QA environment or my station environment or my production environment. I can create a pipeline in Azure DevOps that allow me to bring this solution to different instances all automatically. I can create an automatic pipeline that allow me to do that. So actually, you can see here that this option is connected to this environment, and I have this project where this data model is going to bring the data on. Then the other thing that I want to mention here is that actually, if I right-click in my Solution Explorer and go to Properties, I can Let me share this with you. You can see here that I can deploy Microsoft Webinars. That is the name for my database. We can webinar model. That is the name of my model. And then I need to bring the server here. And this is where we can start talking about the main point of our talk today. Because until now, until a few months ago, what we can bring from SQL Data Tools was the deployment from Visual Studio Data Tools directly to my Azure Analysis Service. So I show you that my Azure Analysis Service in my Azure portal, this is the name of my server. I can just copy to my clipboard and then paste that name directly here. If I bring this here, and then I always use the processing option to not process because I prefer to process only the metadata of my data model and then process the data itself directly in my Management Studio window. But you can do whatever you want in this case. And after I do that, I can directly deploy the data model from here. Go to the database. And actually from here, I can deploy the data model directly to the Azure Analysis Services. And this is going to bring the data model directly to Azure Analysis Services with all the metadata there. And if I go again to my SQL Management Studio and I refresh the connection to my Azure Analysis Services, I can see now that in the databases, right now I have the Microsoft Webinars here, and I can see the connection to my Azure SQL database, and then I have all the tables there. And again, if I want to connect and use or reuse this data model from Power BI Desktop, any team member of the visualization team, they can get the data from Power BI Desktop, connect, doing live connection to Azure Analysis Services. The main reason or the main goal to do that is that they are going to use Power BI Desktop as a visualization layer, and they are not going to use Power BI Desktop to do any kind of transformation or mashups. They are going to use the Power BI Desktop session just to create visuals and objects and all the stuff. They are bringing all these tables directly from the live connection to the Azure Analysis Service instance.
Okay. Hey, Gaston, we have a couple of questions. Do we have time to answer a couple right now? Would you like to wait for the end?
I would love to do some questions right now, actually. Go ahead.
One of the attendees asked, can we bring it in, can you bring in other cloud sources in analysis services?
For now, Azure Analysis Services is only in Azure environment. And you know, one of the things that I'm going to explain a little bit later is that actually you can use or reuse the XMLA endpoint from any other visualization tool. That is doable right now.
Okay, awesome. And then Alberto said, I guess to process only need partitions. I must create a script and then change it anytime, right? Is there any other option to automate this?
That is a really great question, and I've been doing some of, because this is kind of my experience directly on the ground working with Azure Analysis Services and now with XMLA endpoints. So that question is really great, because this is something that in the practice is giving everyone headache or trying to think in the best way where you can process your partitions. So actually, I'm going to bring my data model here. And let's say that you bring your sales order details here and you have multiple partitions. As I mentioned, maybe here you have partitions for the months January, February, March, April, because you want to partition your sales in each month and you want to process maybe your last 2 months. If you want to do that, you can process here with this option that allow you to process the partitions. But if you want to automatically process the partitions, you have different options outside. One of the options is using Azure Data Factory and create a web action and call the REST API of Azure Analytics Services. Another option is Logic Apps. You can use Logic Apps to process your partitions. Other option that I've been digging a little bit and I asked Daniel Oettinger, he's amazing. He's the creator of Tabular Editor, a great tool to handle this. And I'm gonna show you something about Tabular Editor. But with Tabular Editor, also you can bring a solution using Azure DevOps and Tabular Editor to process the partitions of your data model. So you need to work a little bit, but it's all doable, and you can do an automate process to process even the whole data model, only one table or only one partition. You can do all whatever you want to process your data model using those tools. So you have several options. I name Logic Apps, I name Azure Functions, I name Azure Data Factory, I name Azure DevOps in combination with Tabular Editor. You have different options to process your data model.
Okay, that's awesome. Thank you for that. Are you able to make the screen a little bit larger there, please, Gaston? And then we also have another question from Jim, who says, why did we remove SQL statements in favor of Power Query? And yeah, if you could make that a full screen, that would help a lot of the people that are watching as well.
Great.
That's
Great.
even better. Yeah.
Let's do that.
Right. Why did they remove the SQL statements in favor of Power Query? That was the one from Jim.
SQL statement directly in Visual Studio Data Tools or in Power BI Desktop. I didn't get that.
Okay, Jim, we'll wait for you to respond to that, please. And in the interim, we can say, are there any plans to migrate existing data models built in PBI Desktop to SSAS? And that's from Alberto.
That's a great question, and you know there's no easy way to do that, but there's a lot of blogs from MVPs out there that I can point it out. One of them was from the BI accountant from Australia, I guess, and I guess that Rad did a really good blog post about that and how is the kind of the methodology to move data models from Power BI Desktop to SQL Analytics Services or Azure Analytics Services. Actually, right now that we have the external tools in Power BI Desktop, that's going to be easy, and I would love to set up kind of one time to write an article about that, because it's going to be like connect your Power BI Desktop session with Tabular Editor that you have as an external tool right now, and you can use that connection to bring your data model to any kind of different sources like Azure Analytics Services or even XMLA endpoints.
Okay, that's awesome. And Jim did get back to us on his question. He said it's SSDT, so I think that's SQL Server Data Tools.
Oh, okay, gotcha. Yeah, yeah. Here, in my monitor right now, I'm working with SQL Data Tools right now, and actually, you can go to your Tabular Editor here. You can bring your SQL here, and you can import new tables. But again, there's no option as you have in Power BI Desktop now to run your T-SQL directly on the fly in these get data tools. Yeah, I don't know if they are going to bring that, but the product team is working really hard with this, so I hope that option being to us soon.
Awesome. We have 2 more questions. We've got one from Demu. I think it's Demu. I'm not sure, and I apologise for the pronunciation. Will the shared PBI dataset support RLS?
Yeah. A couple of things here. From Visual Studio Data Tools, you can create roles here, and you have couple of features that right now they are on the Azure Analysis Services, but they are not in the XMLA endpoints. I hope that those features we can bring those features to the XMLA endpoint. I know that Christian, Christian with his amazing and his team, he's bringing all kind of features that we already have in Azure Analysis Services to your XMLA endpoint. So I hope that we will have soon role level security in data tools, and that brings to XMLA endpoint and also perspective from Visual Studio Data Tools to XMLA endpoints. I hope that soon is going to be available.
Oh my gosh, I just love Christian's webinars on the clicky, draggy, droppy. They do amazing things.
And he can speak any language in the world. It's kind of amazing, yeah.
I know, right? He's amazing. He's amazing. We have one more question just before we go into the next, which is from Anonymous. Is AAS still recommended option, or use PBI Premium with materialized views?
Right now I've been working different stuff going on, different projects with enterprise, and the answer is that depends in the scenario and the use case that you have. In the enterprise layer, you need to be really careful about what kind of data source you are using. We've been working right now with for example, Synapse Analytics, and what the product team is bringing right now with Synapse is kind of amazing, because as you mentioned, you can use materialized view to create your data model and to bring caching memory views that allow the end user connect really quick to your source, and then hit that queries all the time, and every time you hit the materialized view is really fast than the way before. So my answer to that is you need to analyze the use case to define what is going to be your best architecture in that case. Could be Azure Analysis Services, could be XML endpoint. That depends on the use case and the scenario that you define that moment for that client.
Okay, cool. I think we can move on if you're okay with that, Gaston. Great, excellent. I think we've answered everything.
Great. So as a recap here, we have our data model. I bring and I deploy that data model to my Azure Analysis Service instance. I show you that right now we have this database here, my data model, Microsoft Webinars, and we have the connection, we have the tables, everything is here. Yeah, if you need to process one of the partitions, you can right click here and process the table and process your products or whatever you need to process to bring. And remember that the process itself is not only bringing the metadata to your data model, you are bringing your data from the connection that you have. And here you can see I have 300 rows that we transfer from the Azure SQL database to bring to this table. And I can process at this moment any partition, any table, or the whole database if I need. And then we can connect to live connection between Power BI Desktop to Azure Analysis Services in this case, and we can start creating our graphical objects there. Even if I connect to my Azure Analysis Services, you can see here that I can just write in a select statement here and execute an MDX to see what's going on. in this scenario. I'm gonna refresh this because my connection was lost in the file the last second, so I can execute this and I can bring the connection again, and I can see all my sessions that we are using this data model itself. So that's being said in the Azure Analysis Services way. But what about if I want to use that new feature? We've been talking a lot, and let's recap our slides here. We say that we can bring the data from Power BI Desktop connecting to your Power BI data set, or in this window, I am showing that you can connect live connection to your Azure Analysis Services from Power BI Desktop. But what about this? If you're an admin in your Azure, in your Power BI tenant, you can go to capacity settings here, and you can see your XMLA endpoint, and you can allow to read and write in your XML endpoint. What that does it mean? Because you have your XML endpoint and you can read and write. What allow you to do actually? And you can see here that I am bringing an XML endpoint URL that you can catch directly from your Power BI session. So actually, and I'm gonna bring again my Chromium here, just to take a look in my Power BI environment. I am connecting to my QA Power BI workspace. This is a premium workspace, and you can go to my settings in my workspace, and you can see in premium that I can bring my workspace connection here, and I can see my workspace connection. I can copy that connection, and I can do kind of exactly the same that I've been showing directly in the different tools that I show, like SQL Management Studio. I can connect with my XML endpoint directly in my SQL Management Studio, or I can connect directly to that endpoint in my Visual Studio data tools. That allow me, and you can see that I have several data sets in my environment here, in my workspace here, that allow me to go and open SQL Management Studio here. Let's say that I'm gonna disconnect from my Azure Analysis Services. I'm gonna disconnect from my database engine, and I'm gonna hit again the connection here to Analysis Services engine, and that brings the start of this conversation. Remember that the first time in the conversation we said that behind the scenes in Power BI, there's an analysis services engine. So if I hit connect here, analysis services, and I paste that URL that I bring from Power BI, and I connect to that Power BI URL, I'm gonna bring this really quick with my approval process. And then I can see that after I load the connection to my Azure, my analysis services engine, and I can see that the URL start with Power BI, and I open the databases here. And this is directly using the connection to any data set that I have in that workspace. That is crazy because any data set that I bring there is an XMLA endpoint, and I can see all my connections. I can see all my tables here. I can process from here any kind of the table. I can see all the partitions from here, directly connecting my Power BI XML endpoint via SQL Management Studio. And even on top of that, if I want to create the data model, because here what I am bringing is all the data models, all the data set that belongs to that Power BI workspace. But what about if I want to bring a new data set, a new data model with millions of records, with connections with a bunch of different data sources? I can go back again to my Visual Studio data tools, same data model here with all my relationships, all my measures, all the data coming there. And instead of properties using my Azure Analysis Services here, I can paste again the XMLA endpoint of Power BI. And here I can hit OK, deploy, and I can deploy directly this data model to my XMLA endpoint in Power BI. And then after that, any kind of person that belongs to my Power BI visualization team, they can go to Power BI Desktop and connect directly to that dataset. It's gonna be great in terms of the experience for the end user is all about Power BI. So one team brings the whole data model with relationships, with integration with Azure DevOps, with version control, with pipeline, with all the automation of the process of data enterprise data modeling in Visual Studio Data Tools. Then when they are ready, they can deploy from here to any workspace premium in Power BI. Let's say that we have a dev environment in Power BI Premium and QA environment there, a station environment there. Even I can deploy all the automate process from Azure DevOps to do that. And then after I deploy from here to the XML endpoint in Power BI, I can go again to my session here, and you can see that there's a new screen here saying, okay, your data set is ready. So you can see here that now I see my Microsoft webinars here. And if I refresh here, it's going to bring all the information, not only for the metadata, it's going to bring all the information coming from all the sources that I've been using in that data model. Even if I want to create incremental refresh here, I can do incremental refresh. I can do whatever I've been doing in Power BI until now. I can use parameters. I can use Power Queries. I can bring all the semantic layer from the data model in Visual Studio to this window, and then I can configure any kind of refreshing, automatically refresh, schedule refresh directly, like I've been doing in any kind of data set in Power BI. And then after this refresh, I can go to Power BI Desktop again. And you see Microsoft Webinars is the name of my data set. Even if I want to go here and let's say settings and then endorsement, if I have the rights, in this case, I have rights to promote this data set here. Let's say that we did UAT functional testing of my data set, and that data model is bringing the correct information to my organization, so I can apply this and promote this data set. I can go here to my Power BI desktop session, and I can get the data directly from Power BI data sets, and I can connect that to that data set that I bring right now. And you can see Microsoft Webinars as a data set. I can create from here, and it's going to connect directly to that data set. And you can see that the information is coming really quick because actually I am using the semantic layer engine directly in my data model. So every time I use this kind of ways to connect, it's doing a live connection between the data set and my Power BI desktop session. So that is the way you can see that the data is coming, and it's coming really quick because of that, because we have that information directly working in the semantic layer in the data set that belongs to the Power BI services and doesn't belong directly to my Power BI desktop session. Even if you want to see the relationships in my data model, you can see relationships that we have in the data model. So we bring kind of an enterprise way to work in my data model. So actually going forward with this, we see the XMLA connection, we see the way to connect directly to my XMLA endpoints in SQL Management Studio and hit my analysis service engine directly from there. And this is from Christian, but what we are bringing here is an enterprise solution where we start working with SQL data tools. We bring the data set directly from SQL data tools to Power BI environment. We can connect from SQL Management Studio to create that connection. Even on top of that, we can create a SQL Server profiler if you want to track how you are query your semantic layer, how much time is taking to resolve every measure, every calculated column, everything that you are doing in your semantic layer. You can bring something like this, and this is kind of just a trace in my SQL Server profiler connecting to my instance, and you can see all my queries that I am using in that semantic layer. So you can track everything that happens behind the scenes when you use your semantic layer. As I mentioned, you can use Azure DevOps to create pipelines and to integrate and automate the process of continuous integration in your enterprise management of tools. And the other thing that's really, really great is every time we deploy the data model from Visual Studio Data Tools to the XMLA endpoint, you can do whatever you want in terms of analyze the data using whatever tool you're using in the enterprise of your company. If some of the team is using Excel or another team is using Tableau or is using Power BI, they can directly connect any kind of visualization tool with that XMLA endpoint, and they can reuse the data set in any kind of data visualization tools. So the last thing that I want to show you is that this is one of the things that I already showed, that is the deployment process from SQL Data Tools. But the last thing that before we jump into new questions, I want to show you exactly this. That is, you can download the last version of Tabular Editor, and you can go here and connect. Instead of connecting to your Azure Analysis Services, you can paste again the XML endpoint.
Gaston, would you mind making that screen a little bit larger? It's just Thank you.
I'm going to do that. When you open Tabular Editor, using this tool here to open a Tabular Editor from existing database. With this tool, you're copying again exactly the same URL of the Power BI XML endpoint, and you can connect from Tabular Editor with your XML endpoint and see all. And you can see we have this data model that we bring Microsoft webinars, so I can connect to that data model and we can see everything that's happening directly from here. And from here, the options that we have right now in Tabular Editor, they are really amazing. You can, for example, create any kind of measures on the fly directly from here. You can go here and say, okay, I have line total, unit price, quantity, and I can just right click here, and in custom action, I can run any of these scripts directly from here. So I just create 3 different measures on the fly, just clicking, control click in any field, and right click custom actions, and I can run several scripts that allow me to create different measures directly from here. Even if I click a couple of them right now and I go to custom action again, I can create different measures directly from here. And this is because I use this advanced scripting from here, and we have different templates, different options to create time intelligence measures and everything that we can bring directly on the fly from here, from Tabular Editor, and we are writing those measures directly to my semantic layer using my XML endpoint connection, and we can save all these new measures directly to the semantic layer, and then our visualization team, they can reuse all those measures on the fly. That is kind of amazing, the way we are bringing different tools as external tools to Power BI, and we can bring all this power to create data models in an enterprise environment. I think that's gonna be all from my end. If you want, Kelly, share with me any kind of additional questions that we have.
Yeah, absolutely. Alberto said, does this methodology work with workspaces with embedded and not premium?
In this scenario, you will need a premium capacity. That being said, you can create in Azure what is called Power BI Embed, and that allow you to use that workspace as premium capacity. So you will have XML endpoints in that server.
Okay, awesome. And that was also the next question from Anonymous, is XMLA endpoint a premium service only? Jim Crush said that previously Christian Wade demoed a composite model that connects to two different data sources that are each connected to a different large Azure SSAS tabular models. When will this be available? So Jim, I'll
I cannot talk a little bit about that. It's kind of under NDA, but you know, Christian say soon, so they're working on that.
Exactly. Thank you so much. Is there a way to create a view that unions data from multiple data sets? That's from Jonathan.
That is kind of same question.
Yeah.
What I gotta love to say here is that if you wait a little bit, that's gonna be available. Right now, you don't have the option to combine live connections with different data sets.
Okay, and then that was from Jonathan. And then we have a question, will the link be supported in PBI like it is in SSAS with the whack be supported? That's what, so link ... whack.
Yeah, you know, it's kind of
yeah, we don't know yet, right?
Yeah, we don't know. Yeah, we don't know yet how much time it's gonna take that.
Exactly. And then Alberto had another question, which is, any suggestions on how to get a list of the published reports and data sets across different workspaces? He's using PowerShell.
Oh, that's a good one, because actually what I love to do until now is create your own PowerShell scripting. You can install your Power BI shell models in PowerShell. You need kind of an admin account there, but actually I love to create your own custom scripts, and there's a lot of blogging. Even if you are familiar with the Power BI community, there's a lot of simple PowerShell scripts that you can get from there, and you can just switch a little bit to create your custom scripting.
Excellent. And then one other person said, can we show how to get an XMLA endpoint again, please? We only have a minute left on the call, so I'm not sure whether we have enough time for that, Gaston, do we? Do you think?
Yeah, I don't think so. But what we can do is actually we can bring that to our questions, and hopefully, if you want to reach me via Twitter or email, you can reach me and I can answer offline.
Okay, that sounds great. And then, well, thank you so much, Gaston, for taking the time to teach everyone, share your knowledge, and empower everyone. We love it. We love your work. We also have a survey here for folks if they wanted to take a moment to fill that out. It's always wonderful working with you, Gaston.
Thank you again for having me, Kelly, for your patience and to be here again. It's kind of amazing. It's kind of great. And, you know, the Power BI community is huge and we love that. So please, everyone, join us to celebrate the 5 years of the Power BI love worldwide.
Oh, thanks so much, Gaston. Yeah, we wanted to thank the community. That's really nice of you to remember that. We're thanking the community for 5 years of their contributions and empowering everyone else to do others. And so, yeah, thank you so much for that. And thank you for joining us today, spending your time here with us.
Thank you, Kelly. Thanks to the product team too.